Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to AVI Voice interview program. This week we have an interesting topic to discuss in regard to a recent publication on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. And today I'm honored to be joining by Ms. SOK Khieu Rosette, Director of the Center for Advanced Research and Legal Studies, in short, CARS, of the Asian Vision Institute. So greeting, Bong, and a warm welcome to our interview program.
Hello.
So without further ado, I would like to kick off our discussion. So on 19 August 2023, Center for Advanced Research and Legal Study of AVI officially launched its recent publication on RCEP, which focuses on Geo-Political, Geo-Economic, and Legal Studies by its title. The book collected different aspects from various scholars, experts, and specialists in the field of political economy and legal. So first of all, could you explain a bit more about this book and what are the components of the book? You may have the floor.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you very much for the question and thank you for having me today. So as the title suggests, this book analyzes different aspects of the RCEP agreement from a geopolitical, geo-economic, and a legal perspective. The book is separated into three parts. We start with outlining the historical context, the genesis, and the rationale behind having this sort of mega free trade agreement come into effect in the context of our current geopolitical and geo-economic landscape. We then move on to analyze the scopes and the objectives of each chapter in the RCEP agreement from a legal perspective. And finally, we finish off with some policy considerations for the government and some concrete actions plans for the private sector to be able to tap into these new trade and investment rules. So really, this book is trying to break down the key provisions of the RCEP agreement in a way that is more digestible to the general public. Yes, that's all for question one.
So yes, thank you, Bong. So to add on, and could you tell us a bit more what are the core values and objectives of the book?
Sure. So as authors, as we were writing, we had two core values and objectives in mind in publishing this book. The first core value was knowledge sharing and enhancing access to information. The RCEP agreement in its entirety is around 14,000 pages, and most people probably don't want to have to read 14,000 pages of legal text. Because it's not just about reading it, it's also being able to take what you've read and then being able to apply it into the context of your economy or your business or your country, and really thinking, what do these trade rules actually mean for me? What does it actually mean for my business, for instance? So really, this book is trying to do all that work for the readers. The second core value and objective that we had was to encourage domestic capacity building. In very simple terms, implementation of the RCEP agreement is going to lead to an expansion of trade and deeper regional integration. And what this is going to involve, amongst other things, is an investment in key human capital. Domestic institutions and businesses need to undergo, or they might need to undergo, structural reform and growth to be able to really tap into the opportunities under RCEP and to be able to compete in these external markets. So a very, very simple example is following RCEP, and just in general with the way that the world is developing, we're likely going to see a surge in e-commerce activity in the commercial and the financial transaction space. So what we need to do a mixture of domestically is that we're building up our IT capacity in various spheres. And I don't just mean people who work in IT and who are doing all this digital work, but for instance, our legislatures, our bankers, our taxmen, lawyers, they're all going to have to start to understand the nuances of cybersecurity, data protection, cross-border sharing of information in these types of transactions in order for Cambodia to have laws and means in place that sufficiently protect the general public. So this isn't at all to comment on the current status of our e-commerce law, is just an example that I'm raising. But one of the ways that Cambodia could do that type of domestic capacity building is through economic and technical cooperation. And this is why the last part of our book focuses on policy considerations. We've identified what point we're at now, what point Cambodia will be or should be at once you start implementing the agreement, and then thinking about what we as a society need to do to be able to reach that point and then to fill in that gap. Thank you.
So thank you. Well, furthermore, what is the significance of this production for the practical implementation of RCEP, particularly for Cambodia as a member state, to boost her capacity in benefiting from this enormous free trade agreement?
Yes. So when we discuss about practical implementation of the agreement, it's important to acknowledge that Cambodia has different types of businesses. And the reality is that, for instance, an SME, which makes up about 90% of Cambodian businesses, and multinational companies are going to have access to different levels of resources. So for instance, a multinational foreign company is likely going to have an army or a huge team of technical experts and trade lawyers who can help them to think through their business plan and strategize their business plan through these new RCEP trade and investment rules, both in terms of understanding the larger agreement itself, but then also once it gets implemented through domestic legislation. It's going to be very different for a smaller and medium-sized company who generally do have less resources to dedicate to that knowledge building. So this is why external awareness building and advanced capacity training in general is really essential in order to benefit from RCEP. And as authors, we were really driven by this principle of making knowledge and information as accessible as possible. We will be coming out with a second part, which is going to cover the practical aspects to the RCEP agreement, especially the opportunities that should be developed to support Cambodian SMEs to build their capacity to enter international trade, and generally to lessen the imbalance in bargaining power for Cambodian companies who are entering into joint ventures with RCEP foreign companies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bo. You mentioned that the last part of the book focus on policy recommendations. So from your perspective, on the other hand, how will this book play a role as a policy input to policymakers, practitioners, academicians, and other relevant stakeholders in promoting trade and investment so that Cambodia can remain thriving and resilient?
Yes, thank you for the question. So it's really all about policy coherence. The RCEP agreement sets a certain direction on what the signatory countries should comply with. And if you can understand what these policies are that are set at the regional level, you can then design a national policy that adheres to and is coherent with these regional standards. So for instance, if you look at e-commerce, there are certain issues on data transfer. If this is what Cambodia commits to in signing the RCEP agreement, then at the national level, the line ministries can't then design a policy that contravenes that. The same goes for investment law. There are certain rules around providing protection for investors or in relation to trade facilitation. So when a policymaker is designing this regulation at the national level, they pretty much need to model it after the regional standard. So in short, in order to achieve that policy coherence at the national level, you need to start first with understanding it at the regional level. And we hope that this book can kind of help with jumpstarting that understanding of the regional standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Bo. So last but not least, what is your key message about this masterpiece?
So the key message that we have as authors is that we all need to start making it a habit to learn as much as possible about these types of free trade agreements. A lot of the times it can feel that these types of agreements are happening at the regional level and it feels quite remote, but it does have very practical implications on the ground. And of course, you don't have to learn everything, but if you are working in a private sector, you're working in a particular sector where the RCEP rules really impact your sector, then it should be made a priority for your business to know about the rules that impact your sector. So again, it's all about going back to that capacity building. And as previously stated, big companies are likely not going to have any issue because they may have access to a larger team and more people who can help them to understand these changing rules. But for instance, a smaller company, they're going to have to make a lot of effort to try to understand these rules in order to take advantage of it in order for them to be able to grow sustainably. So for instance, if they manufacture a product, they might need to spend more time understanding about the RCEP rules, about how they can export their product, the rules that regulate that export, or how do you develop a product that complies with the rule of origin. So again, the key message is about building your own capacity to try to understand and exploit these trade rules. And we hope that this book helps with starting that capacity building. And yeah, that's our message.
Thank you, Bong. And that is all from me. And due to time constraint, I wish to end our discussion here. And once again, I really want to pay my sincere appreciation to Bong for your kind, valuable time and contribution joining us to provide a very comprehensive explanation regarding your recent publication on RCEP. So thank you, Bong, for joining us, and I look forward to talking with you again in the future episode of our program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bong. Please stay safe and have a nice day.